let's have a look at the Azure Advisor. The Azure Advisor is like your personal guide that is offering you actionable and personalized recommendations on what you can improve in terms of cost, security, and performance. This is very important to understand, that this is a free service you can use and it's offering personalized recommendations. This means that you don't get generic recommendations, but you indeed actually get personalized recommendations. This comes from the fact that the resources and your environments are analyzed, how they are configured, how they are used, and all of those metrics come together, and then from this you will get those actionable step-by-step recommendations in the following categories. So you get where can you optimize your security, what is not configured in a way that is secure enough, where could you also reduce and save on some cost. Then you also have reliability, performance, and operational excellence. So these are best practices that should be achieved, and if something is missing in your configuration, then you will get those actionable and personalized recommendations. Also, you will get a cloud score that is just showing you how well architected your workloads are. So this is the Azure Advisor that is like your personal guide with personalized recommendations on how you can improve in those 5 categories. And now, to give you a quick impression on how this works in practice, let's have a look in the Azure portal. You find the Azure Advisor usually also on your left side in the favorites where it says Advisor. And in here we can go in the overview. We will see that there are now these 5 categories. So we have cost, then we have security, under security, and these other categories. Currently I have no recommendations, so nothing could be improved. But here, for example, under cost, I have some recommendations. This is what I can see in here. I can see I can save on some cost. And in this case, I will therefore click on it. And there I see now those recommendations. So you can see that, for example, that I could benefit from buying a reserved instance for virtual machines just to save on cost over the pay-as-you-go model. I can also see what are the potential yearly savings. I can also see that this is a quick fix. So you can see this is something where you have a very quick win. In my case, I can have a look at this. So it says right size or shut down underutilized machine, and I have a big saving potential here available. So for this machine, we can see that there is a recommendation rule. This is why this machine is appearing in here, because the CPU utilization is less than 5%. So this means that this machine is not really used, and therefore we could shut it down, or we could also just right size it. This means that we could, for example, just reduce the size of this virtual machine, and we could quickly implement this step. And also for the other categories, this works very similar. We can go under security, and in here you will see that these are the security recommendations, which are actually coming from Microsoft Cloud Defender, which we have already learned about. So we can click in here, and this will bring us directly to Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is also integrated in the Azure Advisor. But those recommendations about security, they actually come from the Microsoft Defender. And then we also have those other categories where you will see the recommendations that you can take to increase your, in this case, reliability. And also under Advisor score, you will see that number that is telling us how much we are actually with our configuration already following the best practices. And we will see also the score by category. So for example, for cost savings, we could increase our score. So we could again just go to cost, and there we could take those steps and increase our scores. Additionally, we can also set up alerts. For example, we can set up some alerts that when there are some virtual machines that are underutilized, I want to be notified and alerted. So this is the Azure Advisor that is analyzing all of our resources, all of the usage, all of the configurations, and then giving us actionable and personalized recommendations. If we are using Azure services in a productive environment, it is very important to be informed about some kind of maintenances, some kind of events that can affect the health of our services. And this is what we use Azure Service Health for. Azure Service Health informs us about the health of the services that we are using. And this is divided into 3 different parts. First, we have Azure Status. This is a global view of the health of all services in all regions from Azure. This is including planned maintenance and any events that can impact the health of our services. This can be just reached at status.azure.com, and there, if we go to this website, we can see that this is very up to date, and we see all of the services for all of the regions and all of the geographics, and we have an overview of the health of these services, or if there are any warnings, if there's anything critical. And in our case, we can see this looks everything very good. So currently there are no problems, and this is a global view and it is very up to date. But the main way which we should use to have a look at the health of the services that we are using, we should use Service Health for this. This is the best place to look for events that affect the services that we are using. So this should be the main way that we are using. Of course, we can also use Azure Status, but for sure we should also use Service Health because this provides a personalized view of the health of our services. And here we also see planned maintenance, outages, or any other issues that can impact our services that may require some action from our side and just inform us on the health of the services that we are using. For example, if we are using a virtual machine, then the Service Health is authenticated and understands and knows what services we are using. So if there are some problems with virtual machines and we are using virtual machines, then we will be notified and informed. And we can also set up alerts so that we will be informed, for example, by email. If there are some problems, we can also specify we want to be informed about a specific region or a specific service type that we are using. So this can be now accessed in our Azure account. We can find the Service Health if we are just searching, for example, for Service Health. And then we can see that there is, in our case, currently no issues with the services that we are using. So we see on this map, all of the locations are healthy. So from what we are using, currently there are no issues. And also we can see additional reports, for example, on planned maintenance. We have some health advisories and security advisories. And also we can see a history of the issues. So in this case, we can change it, for example, in the time range to the last 3 months. And there we see that there was some issue a month ago for a service that I'm using. So this is a Azure SQL database. I can open this up and I get a quick report on this issue. What is affected? What are the affected regions? What is the action that is required? And some additional help and support. So this information we can get in here. So this is a personalized view for the services that we are using. And we can also set up alerts. So for example, in this case, we could say we want to set up an alert rule for specific services, for specific regions, and then be informed about these issues. So this is the best place to look for events that affect our services that we are using, because this is a personalized view. And then lastly, there's also the resource health. This is giving us now a little bit more specific information about resources we are using. So this is now not in general about something that can affect the service we are using, but the resources, so the exact specific instance, for example, of a virtual machine that we are using. If there's some specific problem, then we will be also alerted about this. And we can also see this in the service health. So if we go back, we also find resource health in here, and we can have a look at this. So we have to first select a resource type. Maybe if I scroll down, I find some service that I'm using, SQL database. I see I'm using the SQL database and there is everything okay with it. I can also search virtual machine. Also, this is all good. So we can see that for our specific resources, everything is good. And we can click on that as well and also see that the health history has also been fine. There was one specific day where there were some health events, and we could have a look at this as well. And the rest of this looks very good. So in here we can get just a little bit more detailed information about the resources that we are using. But service health is the main way in which we can see events that are affecting the health of our services. Let's talk about how we can monitor our performance and our usage data. We do this by using Azure Monitor. This is the main tool, main service that we are using to monitor availability, usage, and performance of applications and services. This is done by collecting and analyzing performance data and logs and metrics, and this is possible in both cloud as well as on-premise. So how does this work exactly? First of all, we have a lot of different data sources that track different data metrics, and this can be applications, it can come from infrastructure, but we can also use custom sources. For example, we can also use REST APIs to feed in additional data. And then all of this data will be stored in a data platform, and this will be stored as logs, metrics, and changes. And just in a second, we talk about the difference between those different types of data. Then all of this data will be used to get insights, to visualize the data. We can pin different visualizations in our dashboard and analyze all of this data by grouping them, by running queries, and of course, we can respond accordingly to those metrics. And also, what we can do is we can set up alerts. For example, if a specific virtual machine has now a very high CPU utilization, maybe above 80%, then we want to be notified and we can respond accordingly. So what are those logs, metrics, and changes? First of all, metrics is always a numerical or a set of numerical values over time, and this will be stored in a time series database. So these metrics will be usually just visualized in a graph. For example, as mentioned, this can be CPU utilization. Then we also have logs. Those are events that have happened at a specific point in time, and we can also analyze them by using the log analytics. And there we can write queries in the so-called Custo query language. You don't need to understand how this works, but we'll have a quick look at this later on also in the demonstration. And then we have also changes, which are just a series of events, and we can also set up alerts based on those changes. And then there's also application insights, which in fact is just actually an extension of Azure Monitor. And in here we can also monitor the performance, the availability, and the usage of our web applications. So this is just an extension of the Azure Monitor. And now, with that theory in mind, let's quickly also have a look at this in practice. So if we are in the Azure portal, we find the monitor in the favorites on our left side, or again, if we are just searching in the search bar for monitor. In here, we can now have a look at the application insights, at all of the metrics, set up alerts, and we'll quickly get an impression on how this works. So first of all, we have the activity log. In here, of course, currently we don't see anything. Yes, we do see a little bit, but if we change the time span, for example, to last month, we can see now all of the activity logs that have been gathered in here. So this is just something that has happened. For example, some operation, database has been deleted, and then also the timestamp. And afterwards, we also have metrics. There we can define, first of all, a scope. So for example, we can search for a specific item. Let's, for example, search first for storage accounts. We can select the storage accounts, and then we can select a specific storage account. So for example, this one I want to just get some metrics on, and then I can say what metrics I want to see. For example, I can search for, let's say, transactions, and there I see these are the transactions that have happened, and in here I can save that to my dashboard. So I can pin it, and then if I pin that, I will see that this will be visible in my dashboard. So in here I see this is appearing then in here. So in here we can just have a look at the metrics, visualize them, and save them to our dashboard. And the logs can also be analyzed by using those queries in the so-called Custo query language. I have already selected a scope. So if I, for example, just select this subscription and apply it, I get different tables. So it's a bit similar to SQL. It's just a query language, and don't worry, you don't need to understand how this works exactly. But for example, I can just write app metrics. This is just a table, and then I want to just count that. And then if I run the query in here, and maybe also I have to change the time range. So if I increase the time range, let me select a previous state, then I will see a number when I run the query that should be different than 0, and indeed here I get just the results. So here we can just analyze the logs by making those queries. And also we have the change analysis. In here we have all of those changes. So in here we can see, based on the different timestamps, also those different events and those different changes. So we see whenever there was a change, this means there was an old value and a new value. This is similar to the activity logs, but we always have a change, so an old value and a new value. And then last but not least, it's very important that we also have the alerts. This means that in our case, we have no fired alerts in the past 24 hours, but we could set up new alerts. So I can create an alert rule. I first again have to define a scope. So for example, I can say this should be again filtered to, let's say, a storage account. So let me search for storage accounts. I can select one specific storage account, for example, in here, and then I can set up a condition. So for example, what is the number of transactions? And if I say then, if the number of transactions is passing a specific threshold, so for example, let's say 50 transactions in a given time, then we want to be alerted. So we can set up an action. For example, we want to receive an email alert about this. And again, in this case, you don't need to memorize, of course, all of the details, but just understand that Azure Monitor is about monitoring the resources, the services, the applications. We can create graphs, analyze all of the performance metrics, all of the availability metrics, and have a look at the logs and changes as well. That's what we need to know about Azure Monitor to monitor our services. Congratulations on completing this last module. You made it through, and this last short module we now also quickly want to summarize. So first of all, we've talked about Azure Advisor. This is your personalized guide to actionable recommendations. And here all of your resources will be analyzed, and you will get actionable steps that you can implement to follow the Azure best practices. So for example, if something is not configured the right way, or you have something not enabled, you will get those recommendations in here. This relates also to cost, security, reliability, and operational excellence. Afterwards, we've talked about Azure Service Health, which is divided into 3 different components. We have Azure Status. This is the global view. And here we see all of the regions, all of the services, if there are currently some global problems. So for example, one service in a specific region has some outages or some other issues. This can be seen in here. This can be complementary, but for sure we should also use the service health. This is our go-to place to have a look at the health of our services or if there are currently any issues. This is a personalized view because this service health is authenticated and can see what services in which regions you are using, and then based on that you will see the health of your services. Also in here we find the resource health, so this is the health of the specific instances of the services we are using, so our resources. If there are some issues there, we'll also see that in here. And then in the end, we've also talked about Azure Monitor, in which we can now monitor the performance, the availability, and the usage of our services and applications we are using. And this can be done by tracking different metrics, visualizing the data, analyzing the data, and bringing all of those performance metrics together. We can pin the different visualizations that are relevant to us, and also we can set up alerts that help us to get notified when something critical for us is happening in regards to performance, availability, and usage. These were the 3 topics we've discussed in this module about monitoring tools.